Kendra, delighted to meet you. Thank you for doing this today.
Thank you so much for having me, Rich. It's a pleasure to be here.
I get hit up pretty regularly with people, pitching this person or pitching themselves. And I would say 99.9% of those I just dismiss. But you emailed me some time ago and you shared the link to the uninterrupted video, which I watched right away. And I was like, wow, like this is definitely a person I want to know more about. I knew immediately that you'd be a great guest for the show. And I think your story is amazing and powerful and courageous. And I'm honored to be able to help you share it here today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like I said, kind of came into awareness of yourself about 4 or 5 years ago and an avid listener of the podcast. And just with this whole story coming out, just thinking about, how I want to share the story and kind of the corners of, society I want it to reach and just sort of the type of, content that you put out. I was like, reach out to Rich. What's the worst he's going to say? No? Or just not reply. So I was like, shooter's got to shoot, right?
Yeah,
so I was like,
course.
I'll just see what happens. And then you emailed me back. And actually, first you were like, hey, I emailed you back on Twitter. And I was like, oh, God, I didn't see an email. There wasn't it didn't show up or whatever. There was like a glitch. And I was like, oh, no. And then I was like,
oh, yeah, I think something happened.
Yeah. So I was like having a panic moment.
No, I'm glad that I tweeted you as well because I wouldn't have known that email didn't go through.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I guess Kendra changed her mind.
But I was just super honored and grateful to be here.
Well, cool. Yeah. In the beginning of the video, I think the first thing you say is like, I'm not sure where to begin with this story. And I feel like I'm in the same place. Like, I'm not sure where to begin with it. Yeah. But I guess we can begin at the beginning. I mean, or maybe just explain a little bit about who you are and kind of provide a little context for the subject matter.
Yeah. So, former professional golfer, been an athlete my whole life. My dad played basketball at the University of Oregon. He got drafted in the NBA.
Yeah.
So
what was his nickname?
The Cowboy. Yeah. Doug Cowboy Little. So he got that nickname because so back in late 60s, early 70s, they didn't have a 3-point line. So and he would always be shooting like these long shots. And his coach at the time was like, in practice, like, hey, Cowboy, take that shot back to the rodeo. So because it's like, why are you shooting from so far out if there's no 3-point line? So kind of
he was ahead of his time.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. He was a maverick. Athletics is sort of in my blood. And I have an older brother and an older sister who are both athletes. And so athletics really played, a big part of my life, growing up. I always, growing up figured, not every kid, but most kids grow up, I want to be a professional athlete or whatever the case is. And fortunately had 2 older siblings that kind of, pushed me around and kind of, I think, brought my athleticism to a different level. So sports always, been a big part of my life. And so I, played basketball and golf all throughout high school and was going to play basketball in college as well, but ended up just playing golf and played golf in college at the University of Oregon and then turned pro. And my life is, just kind of revolved around athletics, basically since I was 5 or 6 years old. Right. So,
well, with a dad named Cowboy.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if there was too much choice.
No, exactly. That's exactly right. And what's funny is actually none of my family really play golf. So, my brother did a little bit, but, my dad never pushed basketball on me. That was something that was always, I really enjoyed. And, but golf ended up being, kind of what I stuck with. So, yeah.
So you grow up as a girl, raised as a girl, identify as female today as well, right? So I want to get all of this correct and straight. And as somebody who, was born in 1966, I don't want to fall down the rabbit hole of like old man syndrome. And I realize there's a lot of nuance and complexity to this. So I very much want to like get this correct. So if I misstate something, please let me know.
So first thing you need to know is like, for me personally, I'm super low key about all of that. Like and throughout this whole process and kind of like self-discovery, I like just growing up, I'd get mistaken for, a guy, like, not all the time, but it would happen. And it was something that was like so mortifying. So just, I would avoid like, social, interactions or events to avoid, that happening. And since this whole thing is, transpired, it's like, I don't care anymore.
Right.
It's like, I don't, it's like I've owned who I am, and I love myself for who I am. And it was never about anyone else or anything else. It was always, on the inside. And once I kind of figured that out, it was like, oh, okay, if someone mistakes me for a guy, cool, whatever.
But it's been a journey to get to that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is very interesting just sitting across from you, looking at you, because you are the manifestation of both female and male. Like there's aspects of your face and your physique that are very feminine, and also aspects that are masculine. And it's fascinating just to like look at you. You know what I mean?
I love it.
I hope that's not like I say that with love.
No, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
I love it.
Like you're a beautiful person.
Thank
like
you.
It's a very compelling, interesting look that you have.
Yeah, thank you.
And pose that you strike.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that's like, I think growing up, because I found out, at kind of a weird age, at like 12, 13, right when like puberty's hitting, like they, back then, what was it, like 2000, about 2000, 2001, and like a lot of knowledge has like come, into the fray, like in the last 10 or 15 years, and this is still common practice. It's like, oh, we'll just, we're just going to raise her as a girl, and that's that, and that's, we're going to put her on, estrogen treatment, and we're going to raise her as a girl. And so for my, when I found this out, my entire life, I just tried to throw myself in the female box so hard, and just like, and that's why, getting mistaken for a guy was always so painful or whatever, is because I was in my own head forcibly trying to put myself in that female box, and rather than embracing my, diverse genetic makeup,
So the first real pivotal moment though comes at 12 or 13 when you have this doctor's appointment. So walk me up to that point. Like prior to that, was there some gender confusion, or were you convicted in being a girl? Was there some sense that what was the reason that you went to go see this doctor, and what happened?
Right. So, kind of when your earliest memories, as when you're a kid, 6, 7 years old, that's kind of, for me at least, like my first, things when I look back on and think about like how you feel. That's when I first remember knowing or feeling that something was different. But at that age, you're just so, like, your idea of the world is so basic and so, minimal. You don't really like know what to make of it. So I always knew something was different about myself, even before, I found out that I was born intersex. And I could never, put my, finger on it. I could never, figure out what it was. I would, I'd be in school, and I'd have my friends that were guys and friends that were girls, and I could, relate to both of them in different ways, but also kind of feel like not really like fully be able to relate. And so that was always something I felt from a young age and didn't know what it meant.
Right.
It's like 12 or 13, you're going into middle school. You have to have your, physical, for sports or whatever the case was. So going for a physical, and the nurse, you do the whole, body examination, and she could tell that my body wasn't developing, as a typical female would. And she's like, okay, we need to check this out. We need to see what's going on. And so go up to OHSU, which is a very reputable hospital up in Portland. That's when I discovered, or they discovered through ultrasound and blood tests and all that stuff, that I was born with androgen insensitivity syndrome.
Right. So explain what AIS is.
So AIS is a condition. There's like 3 different conditions. And it's intersex is like a big like umbrella term for people that are not born within the typical gender binary, depending on what's inside their body.
Right, it can mean a lot of different things.
It can.
Right? It's like an
huge
umbrella term.
Yeah, and they say it's like 1 in 2,000, which is true, but AIS is more like, I don't want to misquote this, but it's something like 1 in 200,000. So it's pretty rare.
But that still means there's tens of thousands of people walking around.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, so it can mean different things. So for me, I was born without any female reproductive parts, any female internally sexual reproductive parts. I was born with male reproductive parts internally. So that's essentially.
But it was not evident when you were born.
Exactly. So that's where it can kind of, differ. So sometimes it's detectable at birth, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not detected until puberty, which was the case for me. And what's really not a good thing, and there's doctors are still doing this, is these babies that they detect, are born intersex, are assigning genders to these babies before, they grow up and are able to decide for themselves who they want to be. And so you have these kids who are growing up, and sometimes, the parents won't even let them know that this happened. And so they'll grow up and be like, I don't feel right. Something's different. I don't identify with, my gender. And then they come to find out that they were born intersex and were assigned a gender as an infant. So,
yeah. Well, we live in a binary dualistic society. I mean, when you're born, there's a birth certificate and there's 2 boxes, right? So you got to check one of those.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And that's changing. I was just telling Daniel that Oregon just passed not a law, but they're allowing people to identify as the third gender on their license when they're applying to get their license. So you're seeing all these little things that are coming into the equation that are allowing people to be a little bit more diverse with what they identify as. Yeah, fluid. Exactly.
And I think it's important. I mean, this comes into play when we're going to talk about sports down the line here, but not to conflate intersex with trans. Like, these are different things.
Exactly. I think that's an important thing to say. Because this is something that I've been trying to kind of tiptoe around, like, as in talking about this, because one thing I don't want to do is alienate the trans community and delegitimize, what they're feeling, just because it's not, from a genetic standpoint. Right. I was genetically born both, but that doesn't mean that someone that wasn't genetically born, not, as they were born or who they were born as, that doesn't take away from how they feel.
Right.
Just because they don't have like a, genetic, thing to back it up. So,
right. Yeah. There's a distinction between biology and gender. Here,
exactly.
Right. And
exactly.
This is where it starts to quickly get complicated. and
right.
And I'm the furthest, from having mastered all of this, which is why I'm a little tentative about all of it. But
absolutely.
I really want to learn and I want to better understand.
Sure.
But let's go back to 12, 13. You have this doctor's appointment. So are you, like, chromosomally, are you XY or you are? Okay. Right.
Yep.
So it really is this, like, merging of the two in a very unique way.
Yeah. It's, and it just, you can look at it from so many different angles. And I kind of go back to my entire life just trying to identify and force myself into this female box rather than embracing that masculine side of myself, that male side of myself. And, a lot of that has to do with society and has to do with how we're raised and how we come to understand the world. And if I would have had, resources to deal with being told at 12, 13 that you're kind of born both, maybe this would have played out differently. Having said that, I wouldn't change, anything about how it played out. And I'm sitting here talking to you on your podcast about it, which is pretty cool. So,
well, it's, I look at you and it looks like it's an almost perfect blend, like a 50-50 kind of thing. Yeah. And it leaves me wondering whether that's always the case. Like, does it tip sometimes more towards one of the two?
Right, exactly. So what's been cool about this, and sharing my story is I've had a lot of people who are intersex and who are born with, a variation of AIS reach out to me. And so, yeah, it's there's definitely a spectrum. There can be a full-on male born with a variation of AIS, and you look at him and you would never know. You would never assume that there was anything different or that they had, variations of both genders. It's just, it can be
right.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, someone who is visibly very, feminine looking could also, have AIS. So it just depends.
So you're in this situation where you have a choice between being a masculine young girl or an effete young male, but you've been raised as a girl. You have this test, and what's interesting is kind of what happens in the wake of, coming into this information, right? Like, where are your parents in all of this? And like, how did that, go?
Man. So I went up to that doctor's appointment with my mom only. I think my dad was working. And so we went up there and...
First of all, sorry to interrupt, but like, was there any sense on your parents' part, like now looking back retroactively, that they knew like something was a little bit different, or was this a big surprise?
What's funny is, so it's important to state that me and my parents literally did not ever have a conversation about this outside of the one doctor's appointment in Portland that when I first found out. And then when we got referred to an internal medicine doctor in Eugene, that day we talked about it. We literally never talked about it.
You're like, okay,
yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's for dinner?
Yeah. Okay. Hilarious story. So just real quick, I remember we went to that doctor's appointment in Eugene. It was me and my dad, my mom, and that was like just a traumatic experience in itself. But I remember walking out of the doctor's appointment and me and my dad was like, I think the Lakers are playing tonight.
Oh my God.
Like, I'm not kidding. That stands out in my head, like clear as day. And
well, part of that's sort of cool. Like, okay, we'll deal. Like, he's basically saying it's going to be okay. Like, I'm not going to allow this to like color how I see you.
100%. And that's how I interpreted it. And I think, I've heard not a lot of feedback, but just a lot of questions surrounding, how my parents handled it and all that. And I think it's tough. I think you put yourself in my parents' shoes, and I'm the youngest, so I already have that, baby, complex or whatever. I'm always going to be the youngest. And how would you handle it? You're a parent. Like, I'm sure you've thought about it and hearing the story. How would you handle your kid, coming to the information that your kid was born intersex? There's no handbook. There's no like, oh, this is what you do. This is the, I think in how they handled it, I think it was from a place of protection and love and just wanting to create a sense of normalcy for me. And just kind of, sweeping under the rug was, and it wasn't in like we're ashamed of this or no one needs to know about this because we're embarrassed about it. It was more, at least how I was...
Out of protecting you.
Out of protection.
Yeah.
So...
I mean, I'd like to think that I would have a super woke reaction to it. But, culturally, we're in a very different place right now than we were 20 years ago.
Very.
So it's easy to say, right now, everybody likes to think that they would, do the right thing, with whatever terrible thing was happening 50 years ago.
Right.
It's like you weren't living in that moment.
Right,
I don't think it's fair to...
Perspective and hindsight sure changes a lot. So that's exactly, I think you go back 20 years and it's just the rate at which the world is changing and society is changing. It's insane. So 20 years ago, it was a much different, world. So.
Right. But here you are, 12, 13 years old, and they don't tell your siblings, right? So your parents know, it's never discussed again, but you've got this, this bomb just dropped in your life where it's like, hey, you're not a girl, you're not a boy, you're kind of both, you're neither, you're like, what are you supposed to do with that? Yeah. Like there's no counseling, there's no therapy. Like, how are you processing that as a young person?
Exactly. I think I did everything in my power just to block it out and not think about it. And I got really good at it. Which probably not a good thing. I think with anything in life, it's never good to block things out that are clearly impacting your life and need to be addressed. I literally just blocked it out.
Right.
And I'd have moments, or I'd see things in the news or hear about other people that were somewhat related to gender or whatever, and it would kind of bring me back to a self-realization moment, and it was like a great cause of anxiety, obviously.
Yeah. It had to be incredibly confusing.
Yeah, really confusing.
Well, also, it's considered like I was diving, and kind of getting ready to talk to you today. I was diving, down this like rabbit hole of like what is intersex, and there's a lot of pieces that I read that classify it as a disorder, right? And like, it's a disorder. It's a disorder. I saw that word come up again and again and again, and I thought it's not really a disorder. It's only a disorder because of how we socially classify gender, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with you. You were just born in a certain way that's different, but that doesn't mean that you have a disease or anything like that. And yet there was a protocol, right? Like you end up taking, you were doing estrogen therapy for a long time.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing looking back for me was, and I remember at 12 asking the doctor if this was life-threatening. A 12-year-old asking, and he was like, he kind of laughed. He said, "Oh no, it's not life-threatening. You can go on to live a long, healthy life, and it's fine." But I think that was the biggest thing looking back was, and not to throw my parents under the bus.
It can be life-threatening though, because if you don't get help and you're confused.
Exactly. That's exactly right. If you don't have the resources, if you don't have something or someone, some support system helping you walk through this, absolutely it can be life-threatening. Yeah. But it was, that's a great point. It's you see everywhere. It's a condition. It's a disorder. It's something's wrong with you, and that's not the case. Right. That was the biggest discovery for me in this whole process, was understanding that actually it's kind of cool I was born this way. It's what makes me unique. It's what makes me stand out. And I think everyone has something about them that makes them unique, and it's kind of about discovering that and owning it. But that's looking back as a kid, that was something that I really wish would have been clearly expressed to me. That Kendra, you know what? It's great that you're born this way. You're perfect, just how you are.
Right.
That was never
rather
told.
than being stigmatized or kind of carrying around this sense that there's something wrong, but yet nothing that you can do about it.
Exactly. It's like you're going to go to your doctor's appointments once every 3 months and get this injection, and that was just always like just such a awful thing. Right. I'd go do it, and then I'd be like, okay, like 3 months, I don't have to go do that again for 3 months. And then that 3 months would fly by, and then the next couple of days, I'm like, oh, I got to go to this doctor's appointment. Right. And that was my childhood from 12 till 25.
Right.
So,
but now being on the other side of this journey of self-discovery, of like embracing your authenticity, when you and owning your story and kind of owning who you are fundamentally, when you walk into a room and you're like, you stand in your power, it's kind of fucking badass, because it's like, who is that? Like, right. I've never seen anyone who looks kind of like that. Like it's there's a magnetism to it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. So it's funny because it goes back to, it's never about what anyone else thinks or anyone else feels about you. It's about how you feel about yourself. And before I would, I'm like 6'1" almost, athletic looking. And so already I kind of stand out, but then there's these other features about me that make me stand out that don't, that people look at and they kind of double take. And I get that all the time. And before this self-discovery thing happened, that I would just avoid those situations. I would just try and sneak in and just kind of go to the corner or whatever. And not that I enjoy the limelight, really. I'm pretty introverted. But I own all of this and I embrace it. And people still, we were flying down here and I was talking, we were just sitting there waiting to get on the plane in Portland, and Daniel and I are just like charging our phones, and this couple is sitting, 10 feet from us, and I can tell they're talking about me. He kind of like whispers in her ear, and I was like in sentence talking to Daniel, and I was like, sorry, I got sidetracked, these people are talking about me. And Daniel just like starts laughing, and you just kind of have to like laugh at it, because you don't really know what they're saying, and it doesn't matter anyway. And but it is interesting. I think people kind of look at me and are like, what's going on there? That's
you are
different.
in Portland. It's like the most progressive.
I know,
city
exactly.
in America,
There's no better place I really could be from than Portland. So I'm very lucky for that. So
all right. So you start getting these estrogen injections, and the idea behind that is to repress the progression, the growth of like your innate maleness.
Correct.
And kind of keep that at bay.
Yeah, exactly. Because, obviously finding out at that age is pivotal. You're about to go through puberty and your body's about to really change. So it's interesting to think about, had I not gone on hormone treatment, what I would look like today, or how my mind would be different, all of that stuff. But yeah, essentially that's what it was. And that was kind of the goal was, or the plan was, I guess, not by my design really, take the estrogen hormone, and then eventually, have, my testes removed essentially, to whatever. And that's what you hear, from all these doctors that go in and take them out of these children. Oh, it's cancer risk. And it's like, well, actually my body's completely healthy and fine, and everything that's internally in my body is healthy. So like, that's not something that needs to happen immediately or at 18. I can, go on and live an extremely healthy life, and everything internally in my body can be fully functional and fine. But that's kind of that's what they do. They put it under the guise of, oh, well, it's a cancer risk, so we'll just take them out. And it's like, that's something I've heard a ton from people reaching out, and seeing my story is, well, yeah, I'm intersex, but as a baby, or whatever age about the age that I, found out that I was intersex, they removed, had surgery.
Right.
So
and it's depriving you of your agency and your choice about how you want to live and be.
Yep. Exactly.
I mean, certainly, if you want to make that decision for yourself at some point in adulthood, that's your prerogative. But the fact that it would be done, at birth or as a young person doesn't seem to make sense. I know there's some intersex advocacy groups that are really rallying against that practice.
Yeah, Interact is one agency that I've been kind of in touch with, and they've been great throughout this whole process. I've been talking with a lady that is kind of the head of that, and we had a really good conversation, and just hearing about her experience. She's like, I think 45, so I mean, I can't imagine, being born in the late 70s, whenever she was born, early 80s, I guess would be in the 70s, and having, what I found out, it already was, not, woke, like everyone, I can't imagine being born in the 70s and the lack of information that they had back then. Like, it's crazy to think about. So
yeah, well, this is all happening at a good time for you.
Yes.
Yeah. So what is the experience of getting estrogen injections? Like, how does that change how you feel?
So I just remember, from an aesthetic standpoint, my body, I gained weight, I had acne, really soft features, lethargic all the time. Like I said, basketball was, a big part of my life, and just absolutely loved playing. And I look back on my high school career, and there was never a game where I felt like my energy level was at 100%. I was always at 75, 80%, no matter what. And it's not like I wasn't conditioning. It's not like I wasn't practicing, doing all these things. And so that was a big part of it. Just your overall morale is just down. That's the best way I can explain it. And that's traditionally how I always felt, was just not at 100%. And for me, it's like, you're putting something, foreign agent in your body that's not meant to be there. Clearly I was born this way and should just be left alone. And I don't need anything else. I don't need some foreign agent, to come into my body and,
disrupt your
exactly.
hormonal regulation.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, it was, just not a good experience at all. And I stopped taking it. I'll be 31 in a couple of days. Stopped taking it when I was 25, and from basically 25 on, I've never felt better. I've never felt more energized, more alert, just cognitive function, just everything. And I don't have any science to back that, but just speaking from my experience and my perspective, that's just how I've felt. So,
well, it's great that your body could still go back to its set point after that practice going on for so many years.
Yeah, I think that's just speaks to how amazing our bodies are and how amazing the human body is. It's built to last. It's designed to fix itself and to thrive if you give it the right things. So it is amazing.
Well, it was interesting in the video. You see these pictures of you when you were much younger, when you were taking the hormones, and you look a lot different.
Yeah,
like you look very, very much a girl. And obviously, that had a profound impact on like not just your physiology, but like how you navigated the world at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. It played into sexuality. It played into how I saw myself. and it's all connected. There's different sectors of the mind and the body, but it is all interconnected, and it impacted the way I felt, the way I saw the world, the way I saw myself.
Did you do like the traditional date boys in high school thing, or what was that like?
Kinda. I had not really. And that's another thing that's really funny is I remember going back when I was 6 or 7 years old. Like I had crushes on girls. Like there's no doubt about it. And thinking about it, and that, even looking back on that was definitely like kind of the first sign that something was different. Something was causing that, either whatever. But yeah, I tried to. I tried to fit into that mold. I tried to. I have an older sister, and she, was an incredible influence on me and just kind of helped me navigate. And she didn't know, but I think sisters have certain experiences together and certain conversations together, and those obviously weren't happening. I didn't menstruate. I didn't do these things that sisters would probably be talking about. So she's pretty intuitive herself. So she knew something was different, but didn't
Never said
anything. Didn't fully understand. And but having her kind of help me, and she was so supportive and so inclusive, and just wanted me to be around her and hang out with her friends. And at a time where my self-confidence and self-esteem was low, honestly. That was huge, and it helped. She kind of helped me navigate a very difficult time for any youth, going through high school or middle school. It's a confusing time as it is, let alone trying to navigate being both genders, kind of. So
right. Well, you must have gotten some self-confidence from sports, because you're crushing it in basketball and golf.
I'm beyond grateful for athletics. That's probably saved my life. Not that I ever had any, moments of just, I didn't have any rock bottom moments, I don't think. But sports were always the centerpiece of my life growing up, and had been until I stopped playing professional golf. So in a way, it held me back in some areas of self-discovery, but also was kind of the vehicle to navigate me through a lot of confusion, and almost served as a distraction, which I think distractions in life can be positive. I think they're necessary in certain times, but sports, saved my life essentially.
So what, like in high school, what was your crowd? Like I take it you were like a pretty sort of to yourself kind of person, but like, who were you hanging out with?
Yeah, I was, but I had a lot of friends, and I think, and it's been really cool since this video came out, hearing from people that I grew up with from elementary school through high school, and I keep hearing the same answer is, wow, this kind of makes sense, because we always just saw you as Kendra. Like we never and I hear that from my brother and sister. I hear that from their friends. I hear it from my friends. It's like, oh, well, never really thought about it. We felt something was different maybe, but we just saw you as Kendra. And that's how I feel to this day. And that's how I always felt growing up. And, but yeah, I did kind of keep to myself, kind of keeping people at bay. I didn't let anyone really get too close to me, but was kind of friends with everyone and nice to everyone and got along with everyone, and just kind of tried to just go about my business. And
was anyone like, I knew all along. I knew from day one, 2020 in retrospect.
I honestly, no one has said that. No. The only thing I've gotten is we just kind of thought you were a tomboy. That's kind of like what I get. But no one is, and that's what's crazy. So had you ever heard of intersex, or were you familiar with it before you saw my story?
No, I mean, I've been sort of following at arm's length, like the Castor Semenya's case. So, I mean, that's probably the closest that I've gotten to kind of understanding that.
Yeah.
world.
So it's just, people just don't know about it. And people, you hear a lot about like hermaphrodites, and that's literally not something that is like a human can't be. That means that you have literally both reproductive parts, and that's not something that happens in with humans. So that's
kind of a pejorative term.
It is, and it's not.
Right?
Yeah, it's a very kind of not something that you'll hear that sometimes, and it's very not a welcome term. So yeah, everyone is just like, oh wow, I didn't even know this was a thing. And so we were talking uninterrupted yesterday, and in front of 50 people, and so I was like, had anyone heard of intersex, or have you known an intersex person before you saw my video? And like 3 people raised their hand. So,
or they're like, or they think it means trans.
Yeah. See, that's where it's just, they do get kind of lumped together, and they're obviously, like we talked about, they're extremely different. So this whole process has been educational for me, because for a lot of my life, I didn't even want to think about it. I didn't want to research it. I didn't want to hear about it. I just blocked it out. And so even for me, doing research and learning about it as I'm, telling the world my story has been crazy. But hearing from people, whether it's strangers or friends, wanting to know more and wanting to ask questions, and that's what I want. At this point, I'm an open book, and I want people to be educated.
Right. So you go off to Oregon for college, and you play golf, and you're killing it, right? Like, you're clearly super talented golfer. You have this crazy long swing, right? Like, that's what you were known for.
Yeah.
And I read a little bit, a couple articles, and people were like, yeah, I mean, Kendra could just go into any tournament and win when she put her mind to it. But there was always the consensus, or it seemed like people were saying, she should have gone further with it. Like, there's no reason why she couldn't have been just absolutely killing it on the LPGA tour. So there was something holding you back, right?
Yeah.
So walk me through this experience of playing golf in college and going pro, and what happened.
Yeah. So I just have a very weird relationship with golf. I always have. Basketball was always my main sport. It was always my true love. And I think part of me always feels like I wish I would have taken basketball further. I could have played both in college. I opted to just play golf in the form of being practical, I guess, and with the idea of turning pro after college, which it's just funny because when you look back and think about how you view age and view the world when you're in high school going into college, you think you have all this time, and you think, oh, that's 5 years away. I'll figure it out. When I'm after college and looking to turn pro, I'll figure it out then. And it goes by quicker than you think. And so I always kind of just went along with this idea that I'd play professional golf and I'd just do it. And then with that, I have this, huge thing going on that I haven't addressed in my entire life. So I just, I just kind of delayed it and just let it be, and just kind of went along this path of, oh yeah, I'll turn pro. And so I go play in college for 4 years and do really well. And I'm working towards this goal that's everyone thinks is my dream, that I'm going to go play professional golf and be on the LPGA. And I just kind of go along with it.
But it wasn't really your dream.
No, it really wasn't. And I think it's interesting to look back and think about how I would have viewed golf differently if I would have just been born, or athletics in general, had I just been born, a fully functioning female, none of this extra baggage going on, how I would have dealt with it, and what I would, had I been born, fully female, what my goals would have been, how I would have viewed the sport, and how I would have navigated that. But so yeah, I had a really successful college career, won tournaments, placed well, all conference, all that stuff, and had a 5th year at school afterwards. My senior year didn't end very well, and I was kind of burnt out on golf, so I was kind of thinking about my options, but I was like, well, I need to try this. I need to turn pro and see where this goes. Meanwhile, just still refusing to think about the underlying issue of gender.
Was there a sense that someday, that moment, that reckoning would come, or were you operating under the idea like, I'm just going to hide this forever?
So I figured one day it would come out, and I think always in the back of my head I knew that it was going to get to a point after I turned pro that I was either going to have to fully face it and come out to the world and be like, I was born intersex. I'm going to continue to play professional golf, and I'm going to figure this out. And the governing bodies were going to have to, because they have rules and regulations set in place, and we're gonna figure it out, or it's gonna be the reason that I stepped away from golf. And it ended up being the latter. So I just knew that I played on the Symetra Tour for 2 years. I had status for another year before I stopped playing, and I had a little bit of success, not a lot. And kind of what you're speaking to, just people being like, what's going on there? Like she has all the tools, she has everything to make it to the top, and there's something going on there.
Right.
And I had my swing coach, who was a fraternity brother of my dad's in college, actually, who I had worked with, as a kid and into college, and then as a pro. He was interviewed for a Golf Week article, and he said something like, I always questioned her mental strength. I just figured, she didn't have a lot of strength, and he obviously didn't know any of this about, the way I was born, and he was like, and coming into this knowledge about how she was born, I can't imagine how mentally tough she is. So
right.
I think I always felt like I was mentally weak, because that's what I heard from people. Like, why aren't you producing? Why aren't you shooting these numbers? Why aren't you progressing to the LPGA? You have all the ability in the world, and are you not passionate about it, or do you not have the work ethic? And it wasn't that. It was this underlying, issue of not addressing my
right.
gender.
Well, you're not a fully integrated person.
Yeah.
Like you're in denial of your true essence.
Yep.
So in a game like golf, where precision is everything,
Yep.
That dissonance can't help but affect your game.
Exactly. And that's something that I don't think I ever took into account, that this issue was affecting every aspect of my golf game, of my personal life. It was 100%, especially with in a game like golf, where you have so much time to think about things and process things. And the reason I like basketball so much was because I could just rely on my inherent athleticism and ability to just react and not think about it. Mm-hmm. Golf, I had all the time in the world to think about everything, and not a good thing.
Yeah, thinking, that's not going to help.
Right, exactly.
Like golf's all about trying to not think.
Yeah, exactly. And that's some of the best golfers are just able to just calm their minds down and just go out there and be reactive and just play.
Right. So you have that going on. But I think at the same time, like I look at it as a fear of success, really, because success would mean ultimately that this secret is going to come out, and it's not going to come out on your terms.
100%. It's exactly what it was. Fear of being successful, and because that would 100% mean that it was going to come out. I remember I qualified to play in the U.S. Women's Open, and I was like terrified I was going to get drug tested, and they were going to find, even though I was still on estrogen, they were going to find higher levels of testosterone, mm-hmm. and I was going to get, outed. And that was like a horrifying experience. I played awfully at the Open, and it was an incredible experience because it's the U.S. Women's Open, but I was, in the back of my mind, I'm just sitting there like waiting to get tapped on the shoulder. Come with me. We got to go clean a cup. So
yeah, you could have called a press conference though and come out with it.
I know, right?
Like,
exactly.
Like
I have something small to announce, and just kind of just outed myself and just brought on the storm. And it's just,
you weren't ready.
Exactly.
So you end up quitting golf, mm-hmm. and then it was around that exact same time that you stopped with the estrogen treatments.
Yep.
And so what was that decision all about?
I was just tired of the way it was making me feel, what it was doing to my body. I weigh I'm 6'1", I weighed, I don't know, 160, something like that. And I was, 180, 185. And I mean, I was working out and stuff. I was healthy. I wasn't, doing anything crazy.
It's weird that the estrogen made you gain weight.
Yep.
When it's supposed to keep this hormone at bay that is associated with muscle bulk and the like.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, I'm sure there's science behind it or, whatever, but it was almost not instant, but as soon as I stopped taking it, I leaned out. I was able to put on more muscle mass, which sort of makes sense. But I think my frame, just in general, is obviously more of a lean frame. So I just got back to my essence.
Play basketball now.
Right, exactly. I'm gonna go do an open tryout and just play basketball. Actually, when I stopped playing golf, I actually went and joined a city league in Portland and played a bunch of basketball. So that was like so fun. I don't do it anymore just because I don't want to tear an ACL or tear an Achilles over an open gym. So
and how long once you stopped the estrogen, how long did it take for your body to kind of reach a stable set point?
I would say probably a year. Yeah, probably a year. That's kind of when I really started to notice a difference, sort of physically and mentally. Was about a year. So,
and the fact that you made that decision tells me that you're inching up towards, a willingness to own this finally.
I think so. And you never know.
Like, was there something that prompted that decision?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I met someone last summer. Yeah. And that completely flipped my paradigm 100%.
Yeah. When that person was like, what are you doing? Or were you honest with that person?
So I met her last June. Yeah, June 2018 in Portland. And she knew right away something was different. Something was, but it was totally accepting. And it's just funny because I didn't tell her right away. Like, I still hadn't told anyone. And it led, I think I told her on my birthday, 2018, which would have been like a month and a half later. We had an open conversation about it, and she was like, yeah, Kendra, I already knew, and I don't care. Like, I think you're great. I think you're perfect how you are. And it's so funny because growing up, I always kind of imagined what that conversation would be like with the first person that I told, and just kind of fearing their reaction or fearing, being denied or being just made to feel less. And we, as humans, I guess we sometimes, always fear the worst or think that the worst thing is going to happen. And it was the complete opposite of what happened. And it was like, oh, okay, well, that went pretty well. Maybe, I'll have a conversation with it about this with my family.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the scarier thing, we sort of assume like we're afraid of what all these people are going to think. But I think in your case, it's really about having to then own this essential truth about who you are. Like, that's the truly terrifying part of it.
Exactly.
You can hide behind like, oh, I don't want the judgment of other people. It's the self-judgment.
It's not what exactly. It's never about what anyone else thinks or feels about you. It's always about how you feel about yourself. And for my entire life, I didn't understand that. It was always, oh, I'm afraid of what people are going to think or what people are going to say. And I think you never know what event is going to prompt you to kind of own yourself or whatever, situation it is. For me, it was meeting someone and being told that I think you're great. I think the way you're born is really cool. That's what it was for me. And so it could be meeting someone. It could be an event that happens to you. It could be, a situation that you're in. You never really know what it is going to be, but it is always within you. And maybe it just takes something to bring it out.
Yeah. And the next kind of phase is when you write a couple letters, right? Mm-hmm. So how long after that did that happen?
So I think I wrote that letter to my family. When would that have been? That would have been September? No. Yeah, September, early September. So it was probably 3 or 4 weeks after I had that first conversation. And that was... I sat in a coffee shop in Portland and I actually typed it. I didn't write it. It would have been cool to be handwritten, but it would have been really long. Typed it in a coffee shop and just kind of unloaded on it for 3 hours and sent it off to all of them. And then, the phone started blowing up from everyone. So my brother, he was living in Hollywood at the time. My sister, where was she? I guess she was she was living in Portland as well, and my parents were in Portland. But I kind of dropped that bomb on them, and my parents, in talking to them, in hindsight, they were like, yeah, this was always, we knew this day was going to come. We just didn't know when it was going to come, and we wanted it to be on your terms. So.
Mm-hmm. When you look back on how they parented you through that, do you have misgivings? Like, do you feel like, I wish they had known this or had done this? And how do they feel about, how that whole thing went?
I think from my standpoint, I don't have any ill feelings towards them at all. I think because I know how they acted was from a place of protection and love. That was always the attitude I got from them in regards to this. It was never, like I said, it was never, we're ashamed of this. We can't tell anyone. We're embarrassed by this. It was, I could just sense that it was from a place of protection. I think they haven't really been open with me about how they truly felt and dealing with it. I think they had a lot of guilt, as you get older, and you can kind of start to see through, what your parents tell you. You can kind of be like, oh, they're lying. They're not. That's BS. But
I just feel like at least at one point they would have been like, Kendra, remember that thing when you were 12? Like, are you okay? Like, how's it going?
Yeah.
Like, do we need to talk about this? Like,
it's crazy, right?
Is there somebody that you want to talk to? Can we help you? Like,
what's
happened. Going on inside?
Never happened.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
And from the outside, I can see why people would be like, what is going on there? Like, why was that, like, not even like, hey, Kendra, like, that time when you were told you were born both genders? Like, is that, how are you doing with that?
Did that, were you like, wait, did that actually happen?
Yeah.
Or was that like some dream that I had?
It was like an out-of-body experience. It was like transporting to a different realm and just like, wait, did I just hear that right? Like, I'm both? Huh? So, So yeah, I think they harbored a lot of guilt over it.
It's like you're like a you're like a superhero, or you're not the Avengers. Who are the ones that all go to the school? The mutants.
Oh, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
No. The one where the guy in the wheelchair. The superhero movies. I don't want all the kids that are different and they go to the school. And
I honestly.
What's that called?
Help us out.
What's that?
X-Men.
Yeah, the X-Men. Yeah. It's like you're kind of an X-Man.
Yeah.
But like we're not going to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you just file that away and you're
exactly right. It's funny because I was having a conversation with one of my buddies. His name is Mike. And he was saying, like, your story really reminds me of this animated cartoon that I used to watch. And I don't remember the name of it, but he was like, this cartoon had all these cool superpowers and never felt like he could share it with the world because he thought that everyone would think he was weird and he was embarrassed about it. But really, when he did tell him, it made everyone like him and think he was this coolest thing. And I was like, that's pretty cute.
Right.
I'll go with that.
Yeah.
I don't have superpowers, but I'm both genders,
right.
So.
And just to be clear, like I use the word mutant because that's what the X-Men, that's the vernacular of the X-Men. I'm not saying that in the context of being intersex.
Right.
Okay.
Totally.
Like, please don't at me with that. All right. All right. But you write these letters and it sounds like they're pretty well received, right? Like you're loved by your siblings and your parents and all of that.
Yeah.
So how do you go from there to now, kind of being public about this?
Yeah, avoiding YouTube comments, avoiding comments in USA Today articles.
Well, how did the Uninterrupted project come together? We should say, like, Uninterrupted is the digital production company of LeBron James,
and
right?
Maverick Carter. Yeah.
Did they approach you, or how did they find out, or how did this happen?
It's a crazy story, actually. So after I had that initial conversation, it was kind of tossed. The idea was kind of tossed around, like, "Hey, you should really tell this story publicly, and I think it would help a lot of people." Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Yeah." Like I kind of just told my family, and.
But how did they know then?
Who?
Well, who said? Like, I'm confused. So, did they? Who reached out to who?
Right. So the idea that I would maybe approach some media entity would. And approach them and be like, hey, I have this story I want to share. Would you be interested in helping me tell it? So at first, and I won't name the media company, it was another kind of athlete-geared media company. I approached them and said, hey, well, first I reached out to a friend who I thought might have a connection there. And so I told that friend, who was like the second, third person, that I'd ever shared my story with. It's like, hey, do you think this is something they might be interested in telling? He was like, I think so. Let me get in touch with my friend who's an editor there. So was in touch with that editor for like 2 months, and the process just was really slow. It wasn't I didn't feel like it was going anywhere, and I was kind of getting frustrated. And I ended up telling Daniel, who's here with us today, my friend, my story. And I had told him, I was like, I'm talking to this media company about sharing this story, on a platform, but it's not really going anywhere. I'm kind of frustrated. And he was like, well, I have this friend who works at Uninterrupted. You should reach out to them and see if they would be interested in sharing it. I think they would. So he gave me his friend's contact information, and I wrote an email and said, hey, this is my story. Would you guys be interested in helping me tell the world about it? And he was like, definitely. And it was almost like the next day I was on the phone call with Jimmy Spencer, the VP there, and a creative director, Camille, who I worked closely with throughout this whole thing. And they were incredible. So that's kind of how that kind of came into light. And that was in December of 2018.
Right. So you guys shot this quite a long time ago.
Yeah, exactly. I think the first time we filmed was March, and then they came back up in end of April to shoot again. So it was from December basically until July 8th, I think it was the day it came out. It was pre-production, filming, post-production, and so it was a 7-month process.
Right. It's beautifully done.
Yeah,
they did a great job.
They did. I
can't imagine like a more compelling and graceful way to introduce your story to the world.
Yeah. Super, super grateful to Uninterrupted for allowing me to share the story. And it's not like I'm clearly not a household name. I'm a golfer from the Symetra Tour. So it's like I didn't have that clout, to back it up, but they saw value in sharing a story like this. And I think the uniqueness of it. And I can't really put into words how grateful I am towards them. And just not only allowing me to share the story, but how they handled it and how they knew it was a delicate subject, and just involving me in areas that they probably usually don't allow when they're working with an athlete, but just because of the delicacy of the subject, they included me a lot in sort of the shaping of it and how it was presented, and I have amazing things to say about that.
I mean, it's not really a video about sports.
Exactly.
Being an athlete.
Exactly. I have this crazy story, and I also happen to play golf, and that was very much so. That's kind of how we wanted to frame it as well. As it was, I played golf at a high level, but this other part of it is way more obviously the centerpiece. So that
was like 5 or 6 weeks ago when this thing was published and introduced to the world. And there's been a fair amount of media in the wake of that. USA Today, Golf Digest, there's been a lot of articles out. But I would imagine it's been a pretty tumultuous, topsy-turvy last 6 weeks of you now being foisted, by choice, by design, into this place where you're now, associated with what it means to be intersex and the focal point of conversations that are taking place around this subject, particularly in the context of sports and being an athlete.
Totally. I think, and and obviously whenever the story was going to come out, I knew that was the direction the conversation was going to go, was, okay, well, this is great, but should you have been allowed to compete?
Right.
And that was always what I was most afraid of. And it's, like I said, try to avoid looking at comments on these publications, but I, do take a peek and kind of see what people say. And it's tough. It's a complex issue, and we touched on Castor earlier, and I don't think there is one easy solution or right answer, but just kind of being now looked at as sort of a voice for this gender and sport topic, and it's tough.
Well, you're new to suddenly being a mouthpiece for this.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And so the sense that I get is you're trying to work all this out in real time, but everyone's looking to you now to have an opinion about these things. And, I just know as somebody who has a very, arm's length relationship with kind of what's going on in this world, I have knee-jerk reactions where it seems very black and white.
Yeah.
And even in preparing to talk to you today, I really did some research into this world. And the more that I learn, the more I realized it is much more complex and nuanced than even I originally imagined. And I thought that I had a pretty good grip on it.
Yeah, exactly. That's, I think, to your point, I have been kind of figuring this out as I go. And I don't have an official stance on, I'm very much still formulating, because all of this is still extremely new to me. Like I said, I'm still doing research. I'm still figuring out about myself and what this all means. And like you said, people kind of, want me to have a stance on it and stand for something. And it's tough because I'm not there yet. And I'm still figuring it out. And I think I kind of just go back to the idea of, inclusion. And at the end of the day, that's the direction I think that we as a society are going. We as athletes and the sports world in general are going. You're starting to see way more inclusion, and I think just sort of bending the way that we look at gender and how we, it's not black or white. It's very much a spectrum, and there's a lot of gray area. But with that, it is a complex issue, and it is something that I think both sides are going to have to make compromises in the short term, at least.
It's super difficult. Basically what it is a human rights issue that is butting up against the interest of fairness in sport. Mm-hmm. And it's a gender identity issue that is also butting up against traditional ideas of fairness in sport, and how you reconcile all of these things to create not an even playing field, but a playing field that we can all wrap our heads around that seems at least fair.
Yeah,
there is no good immediate solution. And it's interesting that this coming out, July 8th when this video comes out. I mean, it's right on the heels of May 9th with this big meet where how do you say her last name? Semenya.
Yep.
Caster Semenya, competed at this event and is really challenging these new regulations and rules in track and field that are requiring her to lower her testosterone. And, from what I understand, her medical records are sealed, but there's been leaks, and the kind of consensus is that, she's somewhere on the intersex spectrum.
Correct.
I mean, if you look at pictures of her, it's not a leap, to imagine that that's the truth.
Totally.
And so what does that mean as an athlete who's competing at the highest level? I mean, she won gold in 2012 and 2016 in the 800 meters. Yep. Going into 2020, now being forced to take testosterone-reducing drugs in order to create some, basic fairness in the sport. I don't know that lowering testosterone is the right way. I understand the sentiment behind it. She's a beast, right? Mm-hmm. And if she is intersex, is that fair? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
And we don't need to, come to some determination of that
We're
right now.
We're going to figure it out right now.
But I do appreciate the complexity of it. And I can very much see both sides of this argument.
Totally. Yeah, it is tough. It's, like you said, it's like, first of all, who decides that this level of testosterone is so someone set this level that she's above or whatever, that's the acceptable level. And it's like, okay, some person set that said, okay, well, this is the quote unquote norm or whatever the case is. And she actually just got barred from, I don't know if you saw it, from competing in the world championships. She can't defend her, can't defend her title.
I saw that, right.
Yeah.
So there was an appeal, but the appeal was denied.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think, like you said, in the short term, there is no immediate answer. There is no matter which way you go, one party is going to feel like they're being, given the shaft or however you want to phrase it. So, and like you said, it's like, is the testosterone level, is that the determining factor as to why she's so great or why she's so dominant in the sport, right? So it's like,
I think there's questions around that in terms of how the science breaks down. I know that, whether you're double X or XY is a big factor in how your body processes testosterone. And testosterone isn't the only thing. But I think fundamentally, this is a person who was born a certain way in the same way that you are. And her argument is like, look, I've been a woman my whole life. This is how I was born. If I'm naturally higher in certain aspects of what it means to perform at the highest level, at what point does that become unfair? And the example that keeps getting raised is like, well, Michael Phelps has this incredible wingspan and he's got giant feet and hands. And should we make him, get surgery to reduce the size of his hands because he's genetically gifted in a way that other people aren't? It's trickier with gender and sex, though.
It is. And that's someone actually asked me that question yesterday at Uninterrupted. And this is a deeper topic that we don't have to go into, but I do think it is because she is female and the way but society views strong, dominant females. I think you look at the way, I brought this up yesterday, the way Megan Rapinoe has been treated and how she's been labeled. She goes and celebrates the goal and she's like, oh, she's so egotistical, she's so arrogant. And it's like her male counterpart goes and does that. Cristiano Ronaldo goes and celebrates the goal and everyone's...
Greatest thing ever.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, why is there this double standard?
If there was a male athlete who just had crazy high levels of testosterone,
just nobody
would say, "Well, that guy needs to lower his testosterone.
He needs to go take some estrogen." It would be celebrated. Like, oh, he's such a
And it's a broader conversation about not just gender and sexuality, but also fairness in sport.
Right.
Where do we draw these lines? And we all want some semblance of fairness, but what does that look like and what does that mean? And it breaks down when we get into this terrain. There was a really great episode of Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, Revisionist History, where he talked about this with respect to two pitchers, baseball pitchers, one who I'm forgetting their names, I should know this, but like one who had a surgery to repair whatever the rotator cuff or whatever it is. I know I'm totally recalling this, but that's totally fine. And he went back to normal. And the other pitcher who got it was steroids or some kind of, injections that were just used for medical purposes to kind of enhance the healing process so he could get back on the mound. And that person became a pariah.
Right.
So we have, and that's, this is two like dudes. In Major League Baseball. Now imagine intersex and all of these other issues that get thrown in there and all of our biases and historically how we think about these things. It just becomes like almost impossible to have a cogent discussion about it.
Exactly. I kind of go back to the idea of how are we evolving as humans? And I attribute a lot of my athleticism, obviously genetics, but also having an older brother and having, playing against him and him roughing me up and having to raise my game to meet his level. So it's like, and this is another example, it's like right now in the WNBA, there aren't a ton of women who are dunking the basketball at 10 feet, right? Mm-hmm. So there's on Twitter or whatever, in the past, there's been discussions, well, should we lower the hoops to 8 feet to make the game a little more exciting or how should we handle that? And it's like, well, what happens if we lower the hoop to 8 feet? We're not going to continue to evolve as humans. Someday at 10 feet, there's going to be women who are throwing down the basketball all the time. I don't know how far into the future that is, but that's going to be because you set a level, we will meet it. So it's like, what are we saying if we don't allow caster or anyone who's intersex to compete? If they identify as female and they were born female, if we bar them, I think we're doing the greater, good a disservice. I think allowing these people to compete will maybe not tomorrow or in a year or two, but maybe 5-10 years down the road, it is going to raise the level of competition, in my opinion. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's hard, man.
Yeah,
because I can easily see the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
If I was an Olympic 800 meter female runner,
right,
and I see caster, I'm like,
yeah,
I can't compete with that. That person is fundamentally different from me,
right?
Should be characterized as such.
There's components of her that no matter how hard I work, no matter what I do, I will not be able to compete.
And all you have to do is look at the times.
Yeah.
Like they're so much better.
Yeah. And in track especially, it's like her numbers are like astronomical, like in terms of like distances of the what she wins by is in track terms.
I think at that meet in May she beat the American record holder by like 4 or 5 seconds, or something,
which is insane. It's like
so. But then you looking back on your career as a golfer, like there has to be some aspect of you that has to own the fact that you had an advantage.
For sure.
There's some benefit to being wired the way that you're wired that allowed you to be successful as an athlete.
Yeah, and I think like how far I hit the golf ball is definitely one thing. I'd easily the longest hitter on probably any tour if I were to go out right now. And what's funny about that is it's great. It's great to hit the ball, really far. It can also be a great detriment. Symetra Tour typically plays golf courses that are shorter and tighter, which for someone that hits the ball a long way isn't an advantage. It's actually, so many times I would only hit driver 1 or 2 times during a round. I'd, constantly be hitting like 2-iron off the tee or 3-wood and essentially taking my greatest weapon out of my bag because I'm not going to hit driver on a hole that's short and narrow because the chances that I hit in the trees are, pretty high. So not to say that this is like a disadvantage, but golf is funny in that something that can be viewed as a huge advantage can also be a disadvantage. But absolutely, they're looking at the way I was born and how it put me in a place that other women that I was competing against simply wouldn't be able to get to no matter what they did. That's an advantage. And that's something that, I do have to accept and own. And that's a part, that's a whole part of this.
Yeah. So. How do you think about all these things in the transgendered athlete community? Because then it becomes even harder to wrap your head around.
Yeah. I think there's been a couple of cases in the Northeast somewhere where there's been transgender boys who identify as girls have been allowed to compete as girls in track meets. Mm-hmm. And you want to talk about a sticky subject that I think it goes back to kind of what I was talking about earlier about how just because I was biologically born this way or genetically born this way, it doesn't make how I feel internally more legitimate than someone that was born fully functioning male who identifies as a female. I think when you involve sports, it obviously makes it extremely difficult and tricky, but from a human element, it doesn't make my case more legitimate because I have science to back it. I think it's just about people having compassion for people and understanding that you truly don't know how they're feeling on the inside or what they're going through. And you need to respect that. But yeah, it's a difficult subject.
It really is. I mean, this is a situation in which I really want to fully understand all aspects of this debate and this argument. And maybe it is because I'm 52 years old and grew up in a different time. Yeah. But to me, I look at the clear-cut cases like a transgendered woman who is in combat sports or powerlifting. Right. And those seem to be, people who have undebatable advantages. Right. And it's odd to me that we're debating this at all. But then, I watched a little mini documentary on Vice about this powerlifting transgendered woman named JC. And, she looks at it as a human rights issue. Yeah. And she feels like she has met all of the sort of regulations that she was supposed to meet and took her testosterone reducing drugs and, all the like, and is adamant that she should be allowed to compete. And it's a harder leap for me to see her point of view than it is for me to go, look, if you were born and raised male and you developed, a certain bone density and musculature and all of that, and then you transition to female, and then you go into the boxing ring or the cage and you're in an MMA fight, like it almost seems unsafe and certainly unfair.
Yeah. I think for me, it's definitely a case of seeing both sides to it. I think you have to look at it from both points of view and imagine yourself as, a fully functioning female growing up and what that entails, how your body develops, and the physical disadvantage you have compared to a fully functioning male. You grow up your whole life, you do all these things, you reach the top level, in the MMA, and all of a sudden you're standing, in the ring with someone who was born fully male and transitioned to female. From that person's point of view, I'd probably feel a certain way about it. I think because these rules and regulations are in place and requirements that, okay, if you're a male and you want to transition and compete as a female, this is what has to happen. These are the steps you have to take. I mean, that's the best they can do right now, right? And I just don't. It's so hard to come to a definitive conclusion on who's right, who's wrong, what's the best way to go about this. And kind of like what I said earlier was, both sides are going to have to compromise. And in this idea that inclusion has to be the number one priority, and everyone, no matter how you're born, how you feel, what you identify as, there is a place for you to compete at the highest level in whatever avenue you go down.
Yeah, participation in sports is, a human right.
Yeah,
and
right.
I certainly don't want to be somebody who would prevent or bar anyone from, pursuing their love of sport. And I think, it's going to be interesting to kind of watch this unfold over time. And I would say to anybody who's listening to this, who is transgendered or intersex or has a very different point of view on this, I'm open and willing to learn. Like, my ideas on this are evolving.
Totally.
Like, this is just kind of where I'm at right now as somebody who's barely glanced at this issue. So I don't want to assert that, like, I have a firm grip on this and that, I have an ironclad, opinion. Like, I'm open and I want to learn more.
That's the most important thing, is that, people, and that's what's wrong with our society in general, is people just like, nope, this is the way it is. This is how I feel about it, and I'm not changing my mind. It's like, if everyone could just have an open mind and be open to, different possibilities, we'd make a lot more progress than we do. The problem is, I think the overwhelming majority of people are, closed-minded and aren't willing to shift their the way they view things or the way they feel about something because of their experience in growing up or whatever the case is. Right. And but I totally agree. I think as long as people have an open mind, we can eventually, I don't know when, but we will eventually get to a common ground where everyone feels seen and things are as fair as they can be. So I don't know. We'll see.
Well, here we are. You're 6 weeks out from sharing this publicly. Yeah. I mean, you reached out to me, like you're wanting to tell this story and to share it. So I can't help but presume that there's some aspect of you that wants to be, if not a role model, like somebody who is in this conversation, in service to other people who are, struggling quietly with what you had to go through.
Yeah, I think I look back to myself as a 12-year-old and I wouldn't change how everything played out from when I found out until this moment sitting here with you. But I do think that a big motivation for me in telling this story and coming on, this podcast and sharing it in other areas is to be a voice for kids or adults who are struggling with this or struggling with any sort of identity or whatever they're going through, and that there is a platform for you to be seen and to be heard, and how you're born and how you feel is validated and it is legitimized, and just so much of life is just finding commonalities with people and being able to relate. And I remember the first time I met up with someone for the first time, knowing that they were intersex going into this meeting. It was something I'll never forget. It was the most incredible experience, for the first time getting to relate to someone in person that has gone through the exact same things as me. So kind of taking that and putting it on a platform that obviously I can't meet every single intersex person to ever exist. So, and not every intersex person to ever exist will see this story, but the more that I can share it and put light on it, hopefully the more corners of the world it'll reach. And you don't have to be intersex to relate to my story. I think everyone is going through something internally that or something that they feel on the inside that they don't feel like they can share or talk about or or identify with, this story is for them as well. And whatever you're feeling on the inside, it's, it needs to be respected and it needs to be addressed. And you will always have people in your life that are willing to sit down and hear you. So,
yeah. What is the one thing that you want that person to hear who is dealing with this quietly? I
think what I would have wanted to hear is that the way you're born is perfect. You're perfect just the way you are. We live in a society that tells us there's two genders and there's roles within those genders, and I think forget about it. Don't worry about it. You're unique. You're perfect, and just own it. I think if someone would have told me that at 12 years old when I had just found out, I think that would have made a pretty profound impact on me. Maybe not immediately, but in time. Yeah. And I think I would have been in a place where I could have dealt with this before I turned 30. But I just think that no matter what your genetic makeup is, no matter how you were born, you're perfect just the way you are. So
well, it's interesting times right now because now we are talking about this in a way we never have historically. The subject of transgender rights is first, it's front and center. Yeah. More and more people are coming out, and there's a broadening of understanding on these issues. Why do you think this is happening now? It's not like because people didn't exist.
Exactly.
This has been going on the whole time, but it's only now that we're really dealing with it.
Yeah, I think the world around us is getting smaller because of social media, and people are as close and as able to communicate as quickly as ever. And I think people are yearning for that sense of community and that sense of identifying with other people that are like-minded. And I think that's the single driving force behind this. And it's funny because the person that kind of changed my, kind of helped me flip my paradigm, it was like a, interpersonal connection, but people are, reaching out to all corners of the earth, trying to find people that are like them or like-minded. And, you go back even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people weren't as connected as they are to this day. Yeah. So I think, people are finding out that, there are a lot of people out there that think like me, that are like me. Like we deserve to be seen. We deserve to be heard. And I think you're seeing people kind of grow that confidence and that sense of, I want to put myself out there. And I think that's, it's a beautiful thing. And I hope that it only continues. And I think it will only continue. So.
Yeah. Well, we need more role models and people that are willing to step out, into the spotlight and kind of own this in a public way. And we are seeing that slowly. Like it's amazing. I don't know if you watch Billions, but
no, I don't.
Asia
I
Kate
know
Dillon,
it is,
playing Taylor on that show. I mean, their performance in that program it's really a game changer. Yeah. It's really quite something because you can't take your eyes off them. Like the performance is incredible. Yeah. There's so much charisma and it's such a bold character in the show, a pivotal character. Mm-hmm. And to see that like writ large in a very prominent, well-received television show is not a small thing. And I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that.
That's kind of my hope. It's like in a major, film, there's never been an intersex character. Right. Which when that happens will be the coolest thing ever. Like I think just thinking about everyone that will see that and come to at least get an elementary understanding of what being intersex is, that's going to be a huge day. And like you said, it is coming. I think we're hurling down this road of inclusion and shedding light on all these things that our generations past have put under the rug. So
right. Well, education is everything.
It is,
and it's like, look, intersex is a new thing for a lot of people. Yep. It was for me, and it is important to not conflate it with the transgendered community. It is a different thing. I mean, there's obviously overlap in that Venn diagram, but it's its own distinct thing. What do you think people most misunderstand about you and who you are and what you stand for?
That's a really good question. I think people probably, like, I'm sitting here my entire life, I've just felt normal. Like I just feel normal. Like I just feel like a human. I just feel just how I am. And I think people, in the way that some of the things that they've said, they almost come at it from the standpoint of, wow, you must feel like an alien or something. You must feel like really different, and I do in some areas, but I do just like, I think that's any topic in life is, whether you're a different race or different gender or whatever, is you just feel you and you just feel human and normal. And I think people, from what I've, in conversations I've had, I think people think I feel like an alien or something, like from a different planet or something, but I don't. I just feel like Kendra. I just feel normal, and I think people don't understand that. They have this preconceived, like, yeah, you must feel really different, and it's like, no, I'm just Kendra. I just,
Well, I would imagine you feel better now, like more comfortable in your own skin now because you've owned this completely. Yeah. You've, communicated with your loved ones, and now it's a public thing, and you're standing in that, right? So there's none of that dissonance, and there's no longer a secret that's like eroding your insides and all of that. Like I would imagine there's a sense of freedom that even a couple of years ago you couldn't access.
Yeah, it was just total liberation. That's the best way I can explain it. It's amazing just in hindsight, looking back and seeing how in every aspect of my life this affected me, and in areas that I didn't even realize. I mean, every single aspect of my life, this thing was looming over me, and I got really good at blocking it out and pretending it didn't exist. But subconsciously, of course, you always know that it's there. And I always just had like this anxiety about it, like this cloud, or that I was hiding something, and it was almost not something that I was 24/7 every single day, all parts of the day aware of. It was, kind of subconscious, but, and that's just disappeared. It's just, it's gone. And that is like, everyone deserves that. And like I said, there's varying degrees of what people are going through, but I'm sure everyone has some sort of element to something they're going through that if they addressed it and let it be free, they would feel this way. And everyone deserves to feel this way. And it's almost like an out of body experience. So, yeah, it's pretty great. And I don't want everyone to feel this way. So
I have to ask you, I want to be like respectful of boundaries, and I don't want to be insensitive, but I'm just curious.
No boundaries here.
Like, this might seem frivolous, but I'm interested in how you figure out how you want to portray yourself to the world. Like, do I wear a dress? Like, you're wearing a black t-shirt now, but you're wearing earrings. You know, it's like, there's this mix. Like, or maybe like, do you play around with that? Like, how do you figure out what your aesthetic is? Because this is the forward facing you. This is how the world receives you. So I would imagine there's some intention and thought that goes into that. What I'm wearing cons, black jeans and a black shirt. Right. This is pretty much all I wear. I wear you and me both.
See, exactly. And it's like, I've
got like 10 black t-shirts, and that's pretty much what I wear every day.
And that's something that we have a commonality and we can relate to, which is cool. It's like, regardless of gender, so just kind of not that I identify as non-binary or whatever. Let me just say, like, for me personally, like, I don't feel strongly about like that. Like, I'm not like, I've so many times people have been like, okay, well, what are your pronouns? And I'm like, for me personally, she, her, of course, but like, I don't know. I don't feel really strongly about it, and I don't know what that means or whatever.
Do you feel pressure? Like, you have to be like a social justice warrior in a way that doesn't feel authentic to you?
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better. All I can do is in trying to be authentic is speak to how I feel. And I guess it's like, not like, because my whole life I was trying so hard to put myself in a box. I think that's a part of it that now I'm like, I don't want to be put in a box. I don't like, I would never identify as non-binary and be referred to as they or, whatever. Nor would I want to be called he, but
that's your prerogative.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
Exactly.
You get to choose.
Exactly. And if people feel strongly about that and they want to, and they have their pronouns, I think that's awesome. Whatever is authentic to you, do it. That's my message, really. Just be authentic, whatever that looks like. And so like for me, authentic is skinny jeans, black tee, and some cons. That's right. And if I could wear that the rest of my life, I'll be happy. So
well, you can.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a free world, right? So that's the goal.
So where do you go from here? You're not playing golf anymore.
Right.
I think you mentioned before we started the podcast that you're doing something with Nike Golf now.
Like, yeah. So I just accepted a position with Nike Golf last week. It's not actually fully official, but kind of is. So hopefully.
What is that doing? What?
So it's a brand manager role, and it's kind of a unique role in that I think they're kind of looking to bring someone on that has a different perspective of the golf industry, the golf consumer, someone that has played at a high level. And I haven't, I'm not super well versed in the corporate world. I just never have been. And my skill set is sports and I have a creative background as well. And I think they were kind of looking for someone to come in and bring in and offer a different perspective and point of view. And that doesn't have that history of that corporate background. So right. That's kind of what
you have, like some background in photography and filmmaking and like a branding background as well. Right?
Yeah. And I think that was something that was enticing to them as well. And I didn't get this opportunity because of the story, but I think, and that was kind of expressed to me that is something that makes my my profile unique as well. And so I think they're just kind of looking for someone to come in and shake things up and offer something different. So I'm really excited about it. And like I said, I was a Nike athlete when I was on tour. I played when they were still making golf clubs, played Nike clubs in college, and went to the U of O, which is of course where it started. And so I've kind of been hand in hand with Nike for my whole life. So
and how do you think about this, evolving role as this sort of mouthpiece, spokesperson?
Yeah.
Role model? I would imagine you're getting opportunities. People are wanting you to come and speak. And
yeah, I think that's something that's on my radar. It's tough for me because I think you made this point earlier, was people are looking to me to have an opinion, have an official stance, and feel very strongly, very much one way. But in a funny way, it's like I'm almost coming at it from the standpoint of I don't necessarily want to be black and white on this issue, because we live in a world where there is so much gray area, and maybe that's kind of a cop-out.
But thematically, no, it's perfect, because you're not like your whole thing is like defying this duality,
exactly,
like in being non-binary. Yeah. Like, so how could you be binary on the issue?
Exactly.
Like, it's part and parcel of your...
It is. I know. There are so many like metaphors and
you are literally gray. Yeah. So your perspective is gray.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't have said it any
better.
Well,
that doesn't work for people though. They want you to we want you to come and speak, but here's the line we want you to toe. And that's kind of, how culture is functioning right now in a not good way.
100%. And that's going forward, I think I do want to be someone that is looked to offer a perspective on what I've been through in my life. And like I said, I think I obviously want people who were born intersex that may be going through something similar that I did to look at the story and find solace and feel validated. I also want it to relate to people who are just going through anything in general that they feel like they can't talk about or can't live out. So you're not gonna see me in rallies, protesting in front of courthouses and stuff like that. That's just not who I am, to my core, like from a standpoint of being authentic. But my whole thing is just inclusion, and I will continue to talk about inclusion wherever this takes me and whatever platform I have. And I just inclusion and compassion. That's really the two main things for me. So.
And how's the dating going? Come on, I have to ask.
Oh my goodness.
You don't have to answer.
Wow, on the spot.
You could just say fine or not or whatever.
Not
you don't have
well.
to answer.
No, I'll just be honest. I mean, I think my life has been crazy in the last 6 weeks, and it basically when this process started back in December. I really just secluded myself from the world.
Yeah.
Daniel can probably talk to me, just ghosting and just not being available to hang out. And it was such a weird time going from December until July from when it came out, just almost feeling like because this was going on and I was going to be hanging out with people that I wanted to tell, but I couldn't, or I didn't know if I should. I did kind of seclude myself. And I think a lot of this coming out in the last few weeks and moving forward here in the near future is, opening myself to people, whether it's friendship, relationship, whatever. Mm-hmm. Of course I want that. I think, everyone wants that. But, and I think when you do open yourself to that, the universe kind of, provides that. And so that's what I'm hoping, at least.
Okay, cool.
That's what I tell myself.
Well, I'm excited for what's to become with you.
Thank you.
I think your story is super powerful. It's important. It was very courageous of you to own it and come out in the way that you did. And I really appreciate you sharing it with me today. And I think it's going to be a beacon of light and hope for a lot of people out there. Yeah. So in closing, are there any resources that come to mind? Like if somebody's listening to this and they're relating to you, but they feel alone, like, are there therapeutic resources? Are there certain websites that you know of that I can put in the show notes, or that you can mention now, where people can go to learn more?
Yeah, if you just Google Interact, that's a huge resource that was actually I was made aware of a few months ago. But in the story coming out, people from Interact reached out and said, "Hey, like, just want to introduce ourselves. Like we have cells, kind of all over the country. We have a cell in Portland that, a community where you can reach out and you can, connect with other intersex people. I think that's the one for sure.
Cool.
So if you just Google that, that'll kind of, find wherever you're located should have resources there to provide. So,
and if people want to connect with you, what's the best way?
Just Instagram, Twitter. At Kendra_lit. So
LITT.
LITT. Yeah. 2 T's.
There's a few Kendra Littles out there.
Okay. Real quick.
There's like a software engineer, and there's a designer.
Funny story.
It pops up when you Google you.
Another Kendra Little reached out to me after she saw my story, and she was like, "Hey, never heard of you. This story's amazing. Whatever." I was like, "Oh, cool." 2 weeks later, I'm looking at her Twitter profile again. She lives in Portland.
No way.
Yes. I was like, and I tweeted her, I was like, "Wait, how did I miss that you're in Portland as well?" So I don't know. Like, do you know many Kendras in your life?
No, I don't know.
Like, let alone Kendra Little.
That is pretty crazy.
So she's in Portland, so maybe we're talking about getting coffee. So
all right, good.
So, yeah.
Your folks okay?
Yeah.
They're happy?
Yeah, they're great. Yeah, they're actually moving back down to Eugene, which obviously where I grew up, and my sister just is popping out babies, so my mom's going to be in heaven down there helping raise those. So everything's moving in a positive direction. So
cool. Well, everybody listening, check out the video, the Undefeated video. I'll put a link in the show notes to that. Or Uninterrupted. Why did I say Undefeated? Uninterrupted. Undefeated is a sneaker store in LA. Uninterrupted. Yep. I'll put the link in the show notes to that. Everybody should watch that and come back and talk to me again sometime.
Thanks so much, Rich, for having me on. Super grateful.
Appreciate it.
Thank
How you feel? You feel okay?
Awesome.
Good.
Amazing.
We did it, right?
Yeah, we did it.
It was cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much.